Scientists in Florida are sounding the alarm over what they're calling a wildlife issue of our time.
It feels like we caught the serial killer in action.
Something in the Florida Everglades has been swallowing Burmese pythons whole. These are 13-foot-long, 50-pound animals that are vanishing without a trace, without a struggle, without leaving a single piece of evidence behind. When researchers tracked the missing pythons using their radio transmitters, the signals were still active. They were still broadcasting from inside whatever ate them. But when scientists finally identified the predator responsible, it wasn't anything on the list of animals capable of doing this. It was something that every researcher on that team had walked past 100 times without a second thought. So, who is this new predator that is taking over the Everglades? Let's get into it. The footage. Let's start with what was actually on the camera, because that's what changed everything. The footage showed a Florida cottonmouth. It lay perfectly still against the dark leaves and mud at the edge of the water, practically invisible. Then a young Burmese python came into the frame. The cottonmouth struck before the python had any idea it was there. One fast, accurate sting, that's all it takes. The venom went to work immediately. The python couldn't coil, couldn't constrict, couldn't fight. The cottonmouth then did something that made the scientists watch in utter disbelief. It opened its jaws and started swallowing the python whole, tail first. It worked its way down inch by inch until the entire snake had disappeared inside it. But why was this so surprising? It's the size of the cottonmouth. The cottonmouth measured roughly 34 to 42 inches. The python inside it was nearly as long. The cottonmouth swallowed something just as large, if not bigger, than itself. It didn't break down the python. It didn't take bites. It swallowed it whole in one go. The cottonmouth is a snake that most people in Florida have seen and walked around without a second thought. It has a stocky body with a dark pattern. It's famous for opening its mouth wide when threatened and showing the bright white interior. That's how it got its name. Most people think of it as a snake you avoid, not a predator. But the cottonmouth in the footage wasn't reacting. It wasn't defending itself. It was hunting. One of the researchers later described watching the footage as seeing evolution fight back in real time. They tracked the signal from the transmitter and caught the cottonmouth. They ran X-rays on it. It showed something that should have been impossible. The cottonmouth had swallowed a Burmese python that was bigger than itself. The python's spine and transmitter were still visible in the stomach of the cottonmouth. It was an unexplainable image. Not once in all the years of studying this invasion had anyone looked at a Florida cottonmouth and thought, that's the one. To truly understand why this moment was so important, you need to understand how desperate the situation had become in the Everglades. An ecosystem collapsing. The Everglades is one of the most unique ecosystems on Earth. 2 million acres of sawgrass, cypress forest, and blackwater wetland. It's home to hundreds of species found nowhere else in the world, and for the past 30 years it has been getting quietly destroyed. Not by pollution, not by development, by a snake that is not supposed to be here. Burmese pythons are natives of Southeast Asia. They evolved in the forests and wetlands of countries such as Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Over millions of years, the South Asian ecosystems developed checks on them. Predators hunted them. Diseases killed them. Natural competitors that kept them from taking over. None of those checks exist in the Everglades. So how did the pythons even end up in Florida? The first pythons arrived in the pet trade of the 1980s and 1990s. Soon after, the baby Burmese pythons were sold across America. They were cheap, looked impressive, and were easy to handle when they were small. The problem is that they don't stay small. They grow to 15, 18, even 20 feet. When owners couldn't manage them anymore, they made a decision they shouldn't have. They drove to the Everglades and let them go. Then Hurricane Andrew hit in 1992, a Category 5 storm that tore through South Florida and destroyed commercial breeding projects. hundreds of captive pythons went straight into the wild. The animals that were released into the Everglades found something remarkable: a rich, warm, prey-filled ecosystem, and absolutely nothing could stop them. The results were devastating. A study published in 2012 measured what the pythons had done to mammal populations. Raccoon populations collapsed by 99%, opossums down by 99%, bobcats down by 87%, marsh rabbits, muskrats, and foxes are functionally gone. White-tailed deer were being swallowed whole. Alligators that had survived the mass extinction of the dinosaurs were turning up inside pythons' stomachs. Remains of 58 different bird species had been found in their digestive systems. This happened fast. Not over centuries, but decades. In some areas, even years. But why does it matter if the population of some mammals goes down? The Everglades is a food web, an ecosystem. Everything inside it is connected to everything else. On the surface, it looks like just a few mammals. In reality, it affects the whole thing. 30 years of python predation didn't just reduce the mammal count. It began to unravel the structure of the entire ecosystem. Dr. Frank Mazzotti is a wildlife ecologist at the University of Florida. He has spent over 2 decades studying the invasion. He put it plainly: the ecosystem is being eaten alive, and we don't have a predator that can stop it. For decades, scientists had been pleading with the government to take notice of the problem. And in 2012, the python problem had become so catastrophic that the government had to step in. The response was swift and massive. The first step was the ban on python imports. Many other initiatives followed quickly after that. The fight back. Florida launched bounty programs. They trained detection dogs to smell pythons in the undergrowth. They deployed thermal drones to scan the wetlands from the air. They used environmental DNA sampling, which detects traces of snake DNA in the water. They ran acoustic monitoring, aerial thermal surveys, and coordinated removal efforts across multiple agencies. Every few years, Florida holds a public python challenge. Hunters from across the country competed to remove as many snakes as possible in a single weekend. In 2024, one challenge alone removed nearly 200 animals. By 2020, officials announced the 5,000th python removed from the Everglades. That sounds significant? Then researchers pointed out that the actual python population was estimated at somewhere between tens of thousands and over 100,000 animals. 5,000 removals against that number were a fraction of a fraction. Then, the Conservancy of Southwest Florida tried something smarter. Searching for pythons directly is nearly impossible because of how well they hide. So, biologist Ian Bartoszek's team came up with a new plan. They fitted male pythons with radio transmitters and released them back into the wild during breeding season. Male pythons follow the scent trails left by females. A transmitter-fitted male, called a scout snake, would lead researchers straight to reproductive females. They remove the female before her eggs can ever hatch. Since 2013, this program has stopped over 20,000 python eggs from hatching in a 200-square-mile area. It is the most effective removal method anyone has developed. But even after all this, they were still fighting an uphill battle against the python invasion. The best minds working on this problem had run out of answers. They were hoping for a miracle, something to give them hope that the Everglades could be saved. Then, all of a sudden, without explanation, the python transmitters started going dark. 3 signals gone. In 2021, Bartoszek's team started losing their scout snakes in a way they had never seen before. It wasn't a technical failure. The transmitters were working perfectly. They broadcast a radio pulse every few seconds. Clean, steady, reliable. But the pythons attached to them were disappearing. The first was a snake called Python 19. It had given 3 weeks of perfect tracking data, movement patterns, rest cycles, hunting windows. Then one morning, the signal suddenly stopped moving. Not a pause, not a rest interval, A full stop. The team went to search for Python 19. They pushed through sawgrass and chest-high water to its last known coordinates. They found nothing. No python, no blood, no struggle, no skin shed. Just the transmitter, still broadcasting from somewhere else. Something had consumed Python 19 along with the transmitter and was still moving through the swamp. It happened again in October of the same year. 2 more signals flatlined. 2 more pythons gone without evidence. One of the missing snakes had weighed over 50 pounds and measured nearly 13 feet. And still something had swallowed it whole and kept moving as if it hadn't even noticed. Something was operating inside a swamp full of researchers with cameras and equipment, and nobody had laid eyes on it yet. Bartoszek later described it as the most surreal moment in 20 years of fieldwork. He had stood in front of the X-ray screen and stared. The image made perfect mechanical sense. An animal had consumed a large snake whole. The metal transmitter inside the snake was still intact inside the predator's stomach. Everything about the X-ray image was clear and readable. The thing that didn't make sense was the predator itself. 3 kills, 3 clean total consumptions. No evidence was left at any of the sites. No known animal in the Everglades food chain matched what the evidence described. The team had been working in this ecosystem for years, and they had no idea what it could be. Nothing on the list. Before the cameras gave them the answer, the team worked through every predator in the Everglades, trying to find a match. Alligators were first on the list. They were the most logical choice. Big, powerful, ancient, and already documented fighting pythons. The problem was that alligator kills leave a very specific kind of damage. Crushed bones, torn tissue, the aftermath of a massive jaw biting down with 2,000 pounds of force. These pythons showed none of that. The transmitters were swallowed intact, not crushed. An alligator didn't do this. Florida panthers were next. Panthers are serious predators. They can bring down a full-sized deer, but a panther kill leaves evidence. Claw marks, bite wounds to the skull or spine, clear signs of a mammal attack. There was nothing like that. No fur, no scratches, no footprints. Panthers were crossed off. Black bears? Powerful animals, but bears don't swallow 13-foot snakes whole. That's not something bears do. Crossed off. Large raptors, hawks, and owls take small snakes. Not a 50-pound python. Crossed off. Other large constrictors? Nothing in the data supported it. One by one, every predator that should have been able to do this was eliminated. Whatever was hunting these pythons was doing it quietly enough that an experienced field team hadn't caught a glimpse of it. The team mounted cameras at every location where a signal had gone dark. After weeks of empty footage, they finally got their culprit. It was a cottonmouth snake. This is a snake that is extremely common in Florida. Researchers have been seeing these snakes for years. They have never been thought of as predators. Yet here they were, hunting and devouring Burmese pythons. Built for this. Once you know what a cottonmouth is actually capable of, the footage stops being a surprise. It starts being an obvious thing that everyone missed. Florida cottonmouths, formerly called Agkistrodon piscivorus conanti, have lived in these wetlands for thousands of years. They are pit vipers. Pit vipers are snakes that have heat-sensing organs between their eyes and nostrils. They don't need to see their prey. They can sense body heat. A python pressed flat against dark vegetation is invisible to human eyes and cameras, but it still produces a faint thermal signature. The cottonmouth can find it easily. Even a cold-blooded python gives off enough heat signature to be located. Darkness is irrelevant to a cottonmouth. Camouflage is irrelevant. In its own territory, the cottonmouth can find almost anything. Its venom is hemotoxic. That means it attacks tissue and blood cells from the inside. For a juvenile python, it's fatal within minutes. A young python, in its first year or two of life, doesn't yet have the muscular power that makes an adult python nearly unstoppable. A single bite from a cottonmouth, delivered before the python can react, ends the encounter fast. Then there's the feeding history. Bartoszek's team confirmed that cottonmouths prey on 27 different snake species as part of their normal diet. They regularly eat other cottonmouths. Snake eating is not something they learned to do when the pythons arrived. It's what they have always done. Another thing that makes this battle favorable for the cottonmouths is the Everglades itself. They know every route, every channel, every inch of flooded ground. The pythons arrived in this habitat 50 years ago. The cottonmouth has been here for thousands. The Everglades swamps are cottonmouth territory. The team had finally found a species that was fighting back against the pythons. And now that they had found one potential python hunter, they were hopeful to find more. And the closer they looked, they kept on finding that almost everything in the swamp was launching a counterattack against the invasion. The Everglades fights back. When researchers looked at the tracking data, they found that the cottonmouth wasn't alone. Bartoszek's study monitored 19 pythons. 5 of those had been killed by American alligators. These reptiles had been taking pythons throughout the invasion. Nobody had measured the scale of it because nobody had been looking. In doing so, they had been quietly removing pythons from the ecosystem the entire time. And if the researchers were surprised by the cottonmouth footage, they were left utterly speechless by what the bobcats were doing. In June 2021, a wildlife camera near a python nest in Big Cypress National Preserve recorded something that had never been documented before anywhere in scientific literature. A bobcat, 20 pounds, found an unguarded python nest while the mother was away. The bobcat raided it. It ate some of the eggs on the spot and kept others for later. It kept coming back. When the mother returned, the bobcat didn't run. It held its ground. It swiped at the python with both front paws. The python struck back. They kept fighting until researchers stepped in and removed the nesting female. The bobcat returned and finished off the eggs in the nest. Then, something even more extraordinary happened in May 2025. The camera on a scout snake named Loki showed a decapitated python. It was killed by a bobcat. The bobcat hid the python's body and kept coming back to eat it over several days. This was the first time a bobcat was ever seen killing and then eating a Burmese python. Then, birds of prey were also documented, removing juvenile pythons before they grew large enough to be untouchable. Florida black bears, Florida panthers, and Gulf Coast indigo snakes were observed killing pythons at multiple locations in the study area, in the water, in the canopy, in the undergrowth, at the nest itself. These are all native Everglades species across the entire food chain. They are all targeting the same invasive predator independently, without any coordination, without any plan. The Everglades had been fighting back the entire time. Nobody had measured it until the transmitters told the story. The resistance is real. The footage is real. The cottonmouth kills, the bobcat raids, all of it is real and documented. However, none of it is enough. The honest answer. A female Burmese python lays between 30 and 100 eggs in a single clutch. She can reproduce for years. A fully grown adult python, over 12 feet long, becomes nearly impossible to kill for almost anything in the Everglades. Only a large alligator or a human with the right equipment can do anything about it. The cottonmouth's advantage only works on juveniles. Once those snakes grow up, the window closes. If that wasn't enough, the pythons are also almost impossible to find. They sink beneath the surface of black water and disappear. They compress into spaces no search team would think to check. A lot of the areas the Everglades cover are unreachable on foot. No removal effort, no camera grid, and no drone can cover it all. Florida's record-breaking removal season from 2025 to 2026 pulled 177 pythons. It totaled over 8,000 pounds from a 200-square-mile area. That's impressive. But it's only a fraction of the total population of pythons in that same 200-square-mile space. The honest assessment from every researcher who has spent serious time with this problem is the same. The resistance buys time. Every cottonmouth strike matters. Every bobcat nest raid matters. Every alligator kill matters. Each one removes an animal from a gene pool that otherwise expands without resistance. Each one gives the ecosystem a little more time. Time for these behaviors to spread through killed populations. Time for researchers to develop better tools. Time for nature to figure out how to defend itself against an animal it never should have had to face. Somewhere in the Everglades tonight, in the black water between the cypress roots, a cottonmouth is digesting a python. The swamp is fighting back. However, less than a mile away, 100 eggs are hatching. The question is, who is winning? Is the swamp striking back fast enough, or have the pythons already won? Let me know what you think about all this in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next mystery we dig into. We'll see you in the next one.